Y'all ready?
Everybody ready?
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. Hi, everybody. We're going to start in just a minute. So if there's anyone out there that would like to come in and take their seats, please do so. Can you all hear me in the audience? Is it clear? No? Okay.
Yes.
Mics are working for.
Is it
Yes.
about 32 for rainy?
February
Speed
Testing? Is that better? Okay. Okay, everybody, let's get going. Thank you and welcome to the Lebanon City and School District candidates tonight. I'm Tracy Hutchins, President of the Upper Valley Business Alliance, and will serve as your moderator this evening. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of our candidates for their willingness to serve on the City Council and School Board. Running for local office takes a great deal of commitment. The meetings are sometimes long, the decisions are not easy, but these roles are important to our communities. So many thanks to all of our candidates for their willingness to serve in this important position. Each year, we alternate whether the city or school candidates speak first, and this year we will begin with the candidates for City Council. At 7:30 p.m., we will move to the school board candidates. Each candidate will have 4 minutes to introduce themselves. Candidates, I will hold up a finger to indicate when you have 1 minute remaining, and then I will call time when your 4 minutes are up. And please end your introductions at that time. After the candidates have introduced themselves, we will then open it up for questions. We'll allow each candidate a 1 minute wrap up at the end. If you would like to make a question of the candidates, please come to the microphone, state your name and ward, and then ask your question. You may ask a question to a specific candidate, but I will allow the other candidates to respond as well. If you're viewing us online and would like to ask a question, if you can find the hand icon at the top of your screen, push on that, and we will call on you to ask your question. I will also try to leave some time for our online viewers as well. This year, there are 4 seats open on City Council, 1 seat for Ward 1, 1 seat for Ward 2, 1 seat for Ward 3, and 1 seat for City Councilor at large. Our candidates are incumbent Councilor Doug Whittlesley for Ward 1, who is running unopposed, incumbent Councilor Devin Wilkie for Ward 2, who is running against challenger Paul Roberts, Nicole Ford Burley running unopposed for Ward 3, and 3 challengers running for the City Council Councilor at Large seat, Carlene Roberge, who could not be with us tonight, Laurel Stavas, and Lori Key. We will start with incumbent Councilor Doug Whittlesley for Ward 1, who is running unopposed. Councilor Whittlesley, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm Doug Whittlesey. I'm the city councilor for Ward 1 and running again for Ward 1. I've been the city councilor for Ward 1 for 4 years now. By background, I've spent my career in finance and accounting. I'm a certified public accountant, and really just overall looking to continue to serve and see things through. Obviously it's no surprise to everyone that it's been a tough fiscal environment, both from kind of a big picture, national perspective, pushing down to us, and also from at a local level. So really just in terms of, going over my goals and what I see as the top issues, really just, they're pretty closely aligned. I think the top issues, I think unsurprisingly for everyone, is, fiscal stability and maintaining, a reasonable budget while also meeting critical infrastructure investments that are needed to, preserve or, fix our key infrastructure that's in cases failing with pipes bursting, et cetera. And then the third kind of top issue I see is really housing and how do you responsibly encourage the growth of housing and continue the work that we've been doing around really that what we call the missing middle of housing that doesn't fall into the kind of multi-unit build developments that are occurring now or, single family detached. And then, goals, again, very similar: fiscal stability, investing in our infrastructure, and really preserving the great things Leb does. And I immediately think of like our rec department and our libraries. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whittlesey. Our next speaker will be Councillor Devin Wilkie for Ward 2.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. As was just mentioned, I'm Devin Wilkie. I've had the pleasure of serving as the city councilor for Ward 2 for the past 4 years, alongside my neighbor to my left. I am running again for the same seat. I recognize that this has been a particularly difficult budget season. The past few months, we've heard a lot from residents, far more than I think we've heard in the prior 3 years combined. It's very clear to us that what has been happening cannot continue. It's not sustainable. We need to find a way to create a responsible budget, something that keeps residents in their homes, keeps us from seeing these double-digit tax increases year over year. That said, I don't think we can do that by simply putting a number to the budget and asking staff to meet that number. I think it is incumbent on us as city councilors to pay close attention to the budget, to explore where we can find opportunities to reduce that, to continue to provide the service that keeps residents in their homes, that keeps us enjoying what makes Lebanon such a great place to live, while still being responsible, while still giving us a reasonable level of funding. I have been pleased to be part of the efforts to address housing in the community. I think we've had some really great conversations that I'm happy for us to continue, especially as we look to our neighbors to see where housing can happen throughout the region. Lebanon has served as a leader in that area, and I'm really happy to see us continue to do that. I think there are going to be a lot of challenges for the council in the years ahead, both coming from outside our city as we see what we get from the state, from the federal government, and figuring out how to manage our own budget, how to continue to provide services, how to avoid cutting the things that may in the long run cost us more money. We talked about many decisions of former years that have put us in the position where we are now. We don't want to talk about those. You don't want to hear them. We don't want to make any more of those. So I hope that we can move forward with a budget that works for everybody, both the city staff and the people of Lebanon who want to continue living here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Paul Roberts, you have 4 minutes.
Hello, my name is Paul Roberts. I'm born and raised here in Lebanon. I'm second generation. My father was Roger Roberts. I had to work in his business for many years and taught me my work ethic that I have. I then went on after school. I worked for the local law enforcement for 40 years. I did my time. I retired as the chief of police out of the town of Plainfield after 10 years there. Part of my career, I was in the city of Lebanon for 10 years, 13 years. I ran the 911 Operations Center. It was a dispatch center when I first started. We actually turned it around and got some funding and put the first 911 system in the county here. We also put the first emergency medical dispatch center in the city of Lebanon. But not only did I work for the local government all my life, I also owned businesses. I worked in my father's business, as I've said. I worked 3 jobs my entire life just to make a living because I wanted to retire at some point in time. And now that I've retired, I found that I have to go find another job. I guess so. They're calling already.
Yeah.
I don't think what we're doing is sustainable. I don't think we can keep going the way we're going. I think, I've heard some comments that, we're trying to prepare for the future residents of Lebanon. I think we need to prepare for the residents of Lebanon right now and get the spending under control. I don't think we're doing that. I think we have a long way to go. I bring to you my expertise as far as I've learned how to work with people. I've investigated many crimes. I've learned how to sum people up. I've learned how to analyze data and work the data. I've been a business owner myself, owning a private investigation and security company in town for over 20 years. I did those jobs. I've worked for Hanover, Lebanon, Plainfield, and Lyme Police Department, so I'm a little diversified from the small to the big. I'm not a professional politician, nor do I want to be. I'm here because I'm very frustrated as a citizen in Lebanon and a taxpayer in Lebanon to see what's going on, and it cannot continue. We really have to work on this pretty hard. As a real estate broker, I have people calling me saying, I can't afford to live in Lebanon anymore. And I'm worried that that same thing is going to happen to me and my family because we can't afford the taxes. It's just gotten crazy. I'm not a politician. I'm a father. I'm a husband. And I'm a grandfather for the first time, who's 8 weeks old, I'm so happy to say. And I'm here to give that information that I can help shed some light and come up with thinking outside the box and how to deal with some of the problems that we're faced with. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Roberts. Nicole Ford Burley is running unopposed for Ward 3. Candidate Burley.
Good evening. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. So a little bit about me. I live in the Riverdale neighborhood. I've been there about 6 years with my spouse and my son. My day job, I work in research administration. So I basically manage the finance and logistics for research in education, human development, and societal issues. In my spare time, I am the chair of Lebanon's Heritage Commission. I'm active in the Lebanon Historical Society. I've served on the Valley News Reader Advisory Board, and I recently joined the board of Sustainable Lebanon. So why am I running for election? Like many places, Lebanon is facing some major challenges. I'm sorry, I think we are all going to talk about the same issues, but I think that they're the really important issues. I think those challenges are going to continue for the foreseeable future. These include city budget, growth and development, and external pressures on our neighbors and our community. So I want to be part of the solution to help Lebanon navigate these challenges, and I think City Council is where I can do the most good. In my professional life, my job includes equal parts compliance, fiscal management, and old-fashioned creative thinking and problem solving. So I think these are all areas of expertise that would serve me well on City Council. So I think, as we all recognize, one of the top concerns for all of us is the city budget. And it's one of my priorities to help keep the budget as low as possible without sacrificing necessary services or that the things that make Lebanon a place we all want to live. The second issue for me is housing and growth, specifically responsible growth. People want to live in Lebanon. That's great. And it's important to help that happen in ways that benefit the city and fit with our goals as a community. And then personally, the third issue, my third priority is community and ensuring that we're taking care of our neighbors during times when many of us are struggling and when there are a lot of threats to members of our community from outside the Upper Valley. And this is an important moment to support our neighbors and to ensure that our community is as strong and as resilient as it can be. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will hear from our candidates for the Councilor at Large seat. Candidate Lori Key, you have 4 minutes to introduce yourself.
Good evening, everybody here and online. And thank you, Tracy and the Upper Valley Business Alliance for moderating this important event. I have immersed myself in Lebanon City matters since the ominous news the city manager shared last summer about the need to increase our municipal taxes by 12% or more year over year for at least the next 4 years. That really means a municipal tax increase of well over 50% by the end of 2028. This is why I am here tonight and running for council. The financial health of our city is in dire shape, and I am committed to doing something about it. I have lived and worked in this community since 1980, and I've witnessed its growth and potential. The growth has certainly strained our resources and put pressure on taxpayers, but that's not the only reason we are facing challenges. It seems to me that our council has not been paying enough attention to our financial security. We've watched the budget grow from 61 million 5 years ago to a whopping 92 million today. That's in 5 years. A litany of capital improvement projects are scheduled or in the pipeline, and we will soon reach our debt limit. There have been no obvious course corrections on the part of the council. Our residents deserve better, and that will only come with a slate of new candidates who have the courage to look for solutions, not tax hikes, that work for everyone, and that is what I am prepared to do. As a lifelong advocate for community empowerment, I'll work tirelessly to represent your voice in city council matters. As a new member of the council, I will bring greater level of rigor over deliberations by making certain all relevant information regarding benefits and trade-offs that may affect residents have been fully considered before votes are cast. I'm committed to ensuring every family in our community has the ability to thrive here and the opportunities that we should be allowing them to have. I have 3 major priorities. One is to achieve a sustainable budget that meets the current needs of our residents and reflects the constraints of our local economy. I would start by doing some realistic benchmarking against other municipalities, both for non-discretionary and discretionary budget items. This includes the capital improvement budget too. This is a good exercise to see where adjustments should be considered. We need to take a deeper look at every expenditure and revenue source and make smart decisions about what trade-offs need to happen. I am fully committed to the formation of a finance committee. Over the past 6 months, I've worked with a group of experienced financial professionals who have studied the city's financial audit results and combed through the budget. I did not observe this high level of rigor from the council during the budget process, and I was at the budget workshops in person. I was at the open forums. I will certainly use expert opinions to guide my decision-making on behalf of my constituents. I would secondly want to stabilize property taxes, as we all do. I will work to make the inflation rate, maybe the trailing consumer price rate, the benchmark goal for future tax increases. That's a goal. Whether or not how close we can get to that is our mission. Residential property owners are struggling to afford to live here. I canvassed in the fall. I went to many households. Many people told me their main concern politically was what the heck was going on with Lebanon and the taxes. And they told me stories about the people in their neighborhood that have had to sell their houses because they could no longer afford to live here. This will also trickle down to renters and businesses if it hasn't done so already. And make no mistake, the relatively stronger growth in residential property values compared to commercial properties will continue to place the bulk of the tax burden on homeowners.
Thank you. That was time. Thank you. Our final candidate is Laurel Stavas, running for councilor at large. Candidate Stavas, have your 4 minutes.
Thank you so much. Could everybody hear me? Great, great. Well, thanks for coming out on a kind of dark, rainy night. I've lived in Lebanon for almost 30 years, and in every one of those years, I've had the privilege of serving this terrific city. I was a member of the Listen Board for 10 years. I sat on the Planning Board from 2017 to 2024, represented Lebanon in the New Hampshire legislature since 2018, and have been on the West Lebanon Revitalization Advisory Committee since 2021. Spending time in those various roles has given me a good understanding of how this city works. And I made the decision to run for city council now so I can use that understanding in a decision-making role at a time when we have major changes to make. We have to get creative if we're ever going to rein in expenses and reduce the cost of living that threatens us all. We need to find a way to control a process that just seems totally out of control. But exercising that control means you first have to understand our budget process. what's mandated by the state, for example, what obligations we have to satisfy and how that all fits together. Otherwise, you can spend a lot of time chasing solutions that just won't work in the end. When I was on the planning board, I had the privilege of serving on the CIP, the committee required by state law to develop the city's budget after consultation with its various agencies. We need to understand where in that process we have choices and where we don't. If you approach this question from a position of absolutely knowing that the cost of living in Lebanon has to come down, then you know which levers you can pull and which ones you can't. The bottom line is that you won't waste time going down dead ends, and that's time we just don't have. And I also want to say a few words about why I feel my experience in the legislature will be helpful for us here. Many state reps rotate committees they serve on every 2 years. I've chosen to be on the same committee for 8 years, municipal and county government, and ever since I was first elected. And it's a great privilege now to serve as ranking member of that committee. This is the committee that writes the laws that govern what the state's cities and towns can and can't do. It's the one that oversees the laws that literally touch every single one of us every day. And I want to bring that experience to Lebanon and bring a city councilor's viewpoint to Concord. I believe it would be enormously helpful for us here because we need more city councilors in Concord. New Hampshire's 13 cities produce most of the state's income, are home to most of its businesses, offer its best medical and research facilities, and educate most of its children. But very little of what happens in Concord recognizes the key role that cities play, and that dynamic makes our cost of living problems much, much worse. It's time to change that conversation, time to recognize New Hampshire cities as the true engine of our state's economy and reward them in ways that help us reduce expenses. If I'm fortunate enough to gain support and earn a seat on the council, I promise I will work with my fellow councilors to address the unsustainable cost increases we've all been talking about and we're all struggling with, while moving forward with an agenda in Concord that will help rein in those costs right here in Lebanon. And thanks very much for listening.
Thank you. Okay, do we have questions from the audience? Come up to the microphone, please.
Good evening, candidates. Thank you for coming out tonight and sharing your history with us. We appreciate it very much. I'll ask this question of you, Representative Davis. As we've been talking this evening, we are well aware that Lebanon has been experiencing rapid growth for at least the last 2 decades, resulting in extraordinary demands on its infrastructure, housing, and other services. Lebanon has become the hub of the Upper Valley region. And in its attempts to accommodate all the region's demands, it has placed unprecedented financial pressure on its taxpayers, as we know. The city manager and the current council have all stated that the projected property tax increases over the next 4 years are simply not sustainable. Yet, as I visit the various boards and committees this year in 2025, I see absolutely no slowdown of things business as usual. So therefore, I don't see any potential tax reductions based on their actions this year. Okay. So if elected, what specifically would you help to enact or would you focus on so that the taxpayers could expect to see increases not to exceed the current CPI or lower? And that's a 2-part question. And secondly, with the extremely fast pace the city has adopted to ensure that we continue to meet the demands of the region that we are in, What is your vision for what Lebanon looks like in 10 or 20 years? Are we going to be another Manchester or Nashua? Is that what we want? I'm not sure the current master plan accurately describes where we are headed. Thank you.
Well, thank you for those questions. They are indeed excellent questions. So the first one, what would I do as a city councilor, were I lucky enough to become a city councilor, to reduce property tax increase rates and move more towards CPI? I think that's what your question was. I would want to go deep into the CIP process in the coming year and meet with agency heads to figure out what it is that their priorities are versus what the priorities of you all are, and to make sure that there's a match there between everyone's priorities. And that plays right into your second question, which is, what's the vision for Lebanon in the next 10, 15, 20 years? And does the current master plan reflect what we all want this city to be? Master plans are part of New Hampshire state law. They have become a kind of grab bag of, throw everything into your master plan every several years or so, and then try and outpace pace of progress to keep up with what's happening. In a way, they're a little bit outdated. And we're working in the legislature to make some changes to the master plan statutes so that our vision for the future of our towns and cities will be more closely aligned with what's actually doable and realizable, as opposed to what's purely aspirational. That's going to take a little time. You also talked about Lebanon being the hub of the region. Part of that was driven by the decision 20 or so years ago to move the hospital from Hanover to Lebanon. And that places a tremendous burden on us as taxpayers because that hospital is nonprofit, tax exempt. And while they do have a payment in lieu of taxes, I believe that we should go back and look at that pilot, as it's called, and figure out whether it's truly serving us. What kinds of agreements might we contemplate in the future that would serve us better and help ease some of the pressure on residential property taxes? And those are just a couple of ideas, and I don't want to take up too much time, so I'll stop there. But thanks for the question.
Great. Let's expand that question to our other candidates. Candidate Burley, if you would like to say a couple of words about what you specifically would do to try to reduce the tax impact and also your vision for Lebanon.
Yeah, so I work with budgets every day. As part of my job, I love a good spreadsheet. So my number one goal, which I actually did this a little bit as just an ordinary citizen during the last budget process, was to go line by line through the budget and identify areas where we can potentially make some revisions and try and reduce that budget. I'll say I think City Council did a good job. I think there were additional areas where we could make cuts. So that would be one of my first goals to attack. And also, to really understand what each department's needs are in terms of the budget. It's all well and good to be sitting here and to be looking at a budget and trying to identify where we can make reductions. But really, at the end of the day, it comes down to, what does Public Works need? What does this mean when we cut a portion of their budget? What services are we losing? And there are going to be trade-offs. But that's one area where I didn't feel like I was able to dig into that to really understand what each department's needs are. So I would look forward to doing that on City Council. In terms of my vision, it's very true that Lebanon has sort of become the leader of the region. And I think that we can really lean into the Upper Valley being a region. I feel like we're a little bit siloed. I just learned this week who is on the select board in Hartford. And that's, we shouldn't be that independent. We should be working together with the other municipalities. I hear people often talk about Lebanon carrying too much of the burden. And well, we should be forcing other communities to be taking on some of these responsibilities like housing. And we can't force other communities to do that. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity to work with our colleagues, with our neighbors in the surrounding communities to understand what their concerns are, what their needs are, and to collaborate in that way. So that it's not just Lebanon and everyone else, that we can really work collaboratively as the Upper Valley.
Thank you. Candidate Key, would you like to speak to those questions?
Certainly, thank you. Well, I don't think we should keep doing what we've been doing because we're not getting the results we need to get. So I do think we need to make some changes. I do think also that we have to be strategic about what those changes are. And I think we have to really open up the conversation more to the community. For instance, the budget workshop meetings were an opportunity for the community to sit and listen, but not to comment and not to ask questions. I feel like we really need to have a deep understanding of each department, each line item, and really understand what the community feels the trade-offs should be. I don't think this is just a decision for the council to make. I think we have to get out of this deep hole and we're going to have to dig ourselves out together. And so that would be one of the things. I mentioned a finance committee. I think this is vitally important. We need a different set of eyes, people who love spreadsheets, people who love to understand sort of the financial impacts and to help us review the budget in a much more rigorous way to understand where opportunities might be. I know the people that I've been working with have lots of ideas that they would have put forward as a finance committee that would have helped the decision making, I think, in the last cycle, helped us to see where waste may be. I talked a little bit about we need to do some benchmarking. We have done that, the small group of people. We have opportunities. We are spending a lot of money on similar things that other municipalities do just as well as Lebanon and don't pay as much money. There is opportunity to get this right. We just have to be willing to really struggle through the conversations and to get people all on board to do this. I think this is the time to do it. I know this is the time to do it. I'm not a politician, believe me. I am just somebody who I have a lot of empathy and I care about my neighbors. And I think any one family that's had to leave this community because of our tax burden is a bad mark on Lebanon. How do you let a budget grow over 5 years, almost 30%? This is just not sustainable. So we need to have a new look at things, a new way of doing things.
Candidate Roberts, would you like to weigh in?
I agree. I think we need a finance committee to actually look at this, the experts. Now, we have expert city managers who's been trained and does it well. We have department heads that have trained to do their jobs and done it very well. I think we're missing the boat by not having the finance committee of experts that can look at this and then consult what's going on in the city and look at the long-term plans of what's going on and be able to explain that in terms that everybody's going to understand. I don't think we've had that yet. I don't think everybody clearly understands, if we cut something, what is that going to happen to us down the road in the next year for services? I also think we need to really, in all seriousness, look at a cap with either a tax cap or either a cap with running it concurrent with the CPI, that it never increases more than the CPI index. I think that holds us accountable to a certain level and doesn't allow us to go over that. So we are forcing people to leave their homes. I again think it's a shame, and I'm just shocked to hear that the people that have to leave the city of Lebanon because their tax bills are higher than their bank mortgage. That's just outrageous, just outrageous to me. I also think that we really need to look at our budgets really, really hard. As far as places we can cut, maybe some of the areas we need to privatize. Maybe we should look at putting that out and getting some prices on what it's going to cost to privatize some of our services. There's a lot of things we can do that we haven't done. I just think that we can't do the same thing that we're doing over and over again and expect it to just magically take care of itself.
Thank you. Candidate Wilkie.
Thank you. I think some of the suggestions that have been stated already make a lot of sense. We heard back in December this suggestion for having a finance committee. It's certainly something that has intrigued me since then, and that I think we should seriously consider. We should explore what that would look like and how it might help us. As candidate Ford Burley mentioned, we do really need to very closely scrutinize the budget. We as a council started hearing from residents about the 4th of December last year. And when we started hearing from people in response to a Valley News article, I believe, a few of us did just that. We started looking very closely. I helped to orchestrate a process whereby we went through numerous items to see what we could cut. That happened over the course of maybe a few weeks. Given an entire year to work on this, I think we can make much more progress. I also think getting the community involved much sooner than December would help us. It certainly sounds like we have some really brilliant minds in our community who are very willing to put their resources toward helping us to figure out where we can keep the budget down. There are a number of areas where I'm interested in taking a look. I think there are a few items where we've seen significant increases. Not least among those are, of course, as we heard many times, salaries. As we heard a few times, the increases in technology and other equipment. I think we need to look at those, see what we can do. The idea of instituting a cap is appealing. I am concerned that that would place us in a position similar to where we are, whether it be 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. I don't know. I would hope that everybody here feels similarly, that we all hope to still be here at that point. And I really hope we're not hindering ourselves in the pursuit of short-term savings. I do think there are a lot of areas where we can look in the present budget. In terms of what we want to see going forward, what I'd like to see for our community, I agree we need to look at regional solutions. We did have a discussion with Hartford. I was actually part of a group that started the discussion along with my colleagues, my neighbors in vital communities. We started a discussion that ended up on this very stage between Lebanon and Hartford, looking at housing solutions that might expand beyond one municipality's borders. I think there are more discussions of that sort that we can do that don't force our neighbors to do things, but that encourage them, that show them the benefits. We really do see benefits. I think it's disingenuous to claim that we are facing a burden when we see increased development in certain areas, responsible development, infill in our downtown areas can contribute to our tax base in a positive sense. And I think when our neighbors see that, when we can provide that information to them, we can start to build that. I've heard from colleagues in a number of communities in Thetford, in Canaan, that they'd like to replicate things like that. So in short, I think my vision for the future would include a lot more collaboration, really seeing the Upper Valley as a region unified, and as Lebanon not as the center, but as the leader helping the rest of the community to come to where we are. Thank you.
Thank you.
My turn, I guess. So I think there's a number of things that we can and will need to do, but I mean, that first starts with being pragmatic. When you look at the tax increases, not that it makes it any easier for people, but the overall rate of increase in Lebanon over the past 5-6 years has actually benchmarked along with other cities and towns in our area. Because I looked at that when I saw the budget increases. We maintained a much lower tax rate increase over the past 4 years than other cities and towns. With that said, it's not going to help anyone at the end of the day because you still have to pay it. The problem is how our taxes get paid, and it's all based off property taxes through a process that we don't control. The whole tax process is entirely set by the state. Anytime the valuations of how home sales get above or below a certain threshold, 90 and 110%, we are automatically required to revalue. And that's been a big driver, unfortunately, of our tax rate increases. So I think it's, when we look at this budget, we need to be pragmatic and transparent that we are going to do everything we can to limit essentially tax appropriation increases, but the amount that is being appropriated essentially by residential taxpayers is being shifted by the way the state funds itself and by statute. I think from a pure budget perspective, we need to look at take a hard look at the downtown TIF district. Obviously, one of the things that I had pushed this year was drawing funds from the TIF fund, since we didn't have any necessarily a lot of projects lined up for that. We need to continue to do that and evaluate the TIF district in light of all the other expectations and needs of the city, and not do it in a silo. I think we need to take a hard look at our where we're making investments in the capital improvements project, with the understanding that there are some that we don't control. The Dry Bridge project, certain infrastructure projects, like the state comes in and says, you're going to do these now, or you're not going to do these now. The Dry Bridge project is a great example of that, because if we had just kind of known that this was going to happen 20 years ago, could have done that dry bridge replacement at a fraction of the cost. State doesn't allow us to do that work. And so we're stuck until they say go ahead. And then when they say go ahead, we're stuck with 20% of the ever increasing bill. And we don't have a choice. Similarly, the state just came out too with new requirements around replacing some of our piping, which we're going to be discussing. And again, we don't have a choice in replacing that. So we have to be pragmatic, and that will limit where we can invest in other places. And so we then, as everyone has mentioned, we then have to really look hard at those trade-offs. There are things we won't get to. My biggest concern, the thing that keeps me up at night on a near constant basis for the city council, is all those things that frustrate me now that we didn't invest in 20, 30 years ago, like a new fire station or take your pick. There will be some version of that in 20, 30 years where people will look back and say, why didn't Councilor Whittlesey push for this? And that's where we're really trying to make informed, transparent decisions. I know it's hard sometimes looking at those budget workshops, but I think I send every department head something close to a page worth of questions. It's harder sometimes in those budget workshops to get into some of the nitty gritty. So I try to give them time to respond to them, and then I respond back to their questions. I spend every year over approaching 100 hours just going through every budget, trying to understand it, understanding from the department heads why they're asking for those funds. And so really it's kind of continuing that. But, again, hearing from residents, getting back to increasing the communication around that, increasing the discussion, I think, and allowing for those questions. I think we had some really good discussion in the December meetings and giving us a chance to answer some of the concerns and questions and things that weren't known at the time. And I also think we will have to get tighter on our budget. And I think that's going to have to be not necessarily us digging in line by line in the budget, but going to the departments and saying, what are your major expenditures? What are your major plans of expenditures, right? So not just what are you spending right now, but if let's say you spend 10,000 right now, but then we have to spend 100,000 2 years from now, we should start understanding that better as well. So I think that's going to be part of my line of questioning this year, is just trying to, get them to explain not just what they do, but where those dollars are going, and some of the spend policies around that. for example, like the tech life, we're on a 3 or 5 year, replacement life cycle. Can we extend that out?
Thank you. Okay, we had another question. Could you state your name and your ward, please?
My name is Reverend Steve Silver, and I live in Ward 2. And I have a question here, which I would direct at the current city councilors, but I think I'd actually like to hear everybody's opinions about this. But the city council has already approved recovery housing in the zones over which it has authority and has supported recovery housing in areas up to the voters. Why do you think this is an important addition to the city's zoning ordinance? So this relates to question 2 that's going to be on the ballot, and I'd like to hear from you folks.
Okay, well, Doug, why don't we start with you as the incumbent?
That's a great question. So right now, recovery housing, because of the way the zoning has been written, could be put in anywhere. So to be clear, right now, someone could come in, buy a house and call it recovery housing and put a very significant number of people in that house. We are trying to address situations that we've seen in neighboring towns and cities where this happens, where it is highly unregulated, and there are concerns that perhaps it is exploitative. And so the zoning that we're looking to do is really to more require that recovery housing, where permissible, be regulated by the appropriate certifying bodies for recovery housing. And it's a way to protect both the city and truly the people who are seeking help in recovery. They are some of the most vulnerable population. It is an area where they are prone to be exploited, and we don't want to see that happen. We want to make sure people have a fair chance to recover.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Reverend Silver. I'd also like to thank my colleague for a very good answer. I'm not sure I have too much to add because in part because the council has discussed this fairly extensively. I think the one other point that I would like to make is that as we're talking about the budget and as we're talking about how we can keep costs from continuing to rise, the moral argument, I think, is clear. We care about our friends and neighbors. We care about the people around us who are suffering and who have made these choices to go through recovery, to improve their condition. And we want to ensure that the space in which they're able to do it is a safe space, that it's vetted properly, that it isn't a threat to them or to the community. I think there's also a fiscal argument to be made. I believe it was my colleague here who raised the point that treatment facilities, recovery facilities often return more in savings for the community in which they're placed than the investment placed into them by, if I remember correctly, a scale of 7 to 1. That is to say, when a recovery house comes in, the savings, the reduced harm, the reduced police, fire, EMS calls can make up $7 for every dollar that the city or, in many cases, private companies, private nonprofits put into these facilities. So I think in addition to the moral argument, it makes good fiscal sense to ensure these facilities are safe, ensure we're not further burdening our emergency responders with unsafe, uncertified properties.
Thank you, Kennedy Roberts.
I'm glad you asked this question because this is a sore subject with me. We just had a council vote the other night. I think it was Article 7. Can you approve putting recovery housing in certain areas? The other piece is the police department and the fire department have not even been consulted on this. I called both chiefs and asked them. So why would we look at putting recovery housing in a general commercial area when we haven't even consulted our loan agencies in the town that are going to have to deal with that? And if I read it correctly, we're talking about mental health issues and we're talking about criminals that have access or had problems with the criminal justice system. One, do we want that in our neighborhoods? I don't think I want it in mine. I live next to an emergency shelter right now. I see drug overdoses. I see the police down there all the time. I see thefts. It's terrible, absolutely terrible. And I know there was no concern over the city when they put this in. I think we should not support a recovery house, period. I think if we do, we're going to head to the direction of Burlington, Vermont. And if you call up to Burlington and see what they have and what they're dealing with there, they couldn't even find police officers because nobody wanted to work up there because of the conditions that they had to work in and deal with. So I don't support it. I don't think we should even have it on the agenda. I think we should have moved right on by it. If anything, we should have prohibited that going in a commercial district.
Thanks for the question. This is one of those issues that you have to know where you have a choice and where you don't. And in point of fact, our committee in Concord is hearing a bill this week on zoning for recovery houses. So this is a statewide issue. This is not a Lebanon issue. And once that bill is decided at the state level, Lebanon has very few choices concerning zoning changes and recovery houses. But recovery houses are required to be licensed through the Department of Health and Human Services. So this is not a kind of Wild West scenario. There is a lot of supervision that goes into these very, very necessary places for people to live. One of our questions, though, and this goes to the question of cost, one of our questions on the committee to the recovery house community is it some business model? Are recovery houses businesses? And if so, what is their level of taxation? What do they contribute to the community in the form of taxes? And we are in the process of getting to the bottom of that question. We haven't gotten an answer yet. So we're going to call in the big guns at the Department of Revenue Administration and force them to answer the question. So it's a complicated issue. Recovery houses are badly needed. They are regulated at the state level. The state fire marshal has approved many of the criteria through which a recovery house can be situated in a neighborhood. And this is a statewide issue. It's not a locally controlled issue. Thank you.
Thanks. I guess my first comment simply would be, what is the impact to taxpayers? I would like to be fully informed before a decision is made. So who is going to do that analysis and help taxpayers understand that? Secondly, I'm glad it's on the ballot. This is something that's going to affect all of us. So people should have a right to decide for the parts that they can decide. Is this what we want to do? And what would the trade-off be? What are we going to not do instead of support this? So I'm glad it's on the ballot, quite frankly, but I would like to know, what is the impact to taxpayers? We want to help people. I want to help people, but I want people also to be able to live here, be comfortable in their community. I give somebody immense amount of credit for overcoming an addiction. It's a terrible disease. It ruins families. It ruins lives. Pragmatically though, what is the impact? We have to live in this community. We cannot have, 30% increase in budget with two counselors that are sitting here tonight that's during their watch. So I just want to point out, what are we going to have to change? What are we going to have to give up if this, in fact, is the most important thing to our community?
Again, thank you for the question. I guess I would say that I don't want to repeat what Councillor Whittlesey and Councillor Wilkie said. Largely, I agree with them. These are our neighbors. For me, this goes back to taking care of our community and making sure that our neighbors have the help that they need and that it's regulated, that it's data-driven, that this is, we're providing treatment that is being overseen and informed. And I'll also say that, I'm in favor of people go through horrible experiences, and if someone from Lebanon can come back to Lebanon to get back on their feet, they don't have to go to a community they've never been to. They don't have to go to a part of the state they've never lived in. If they can do that at home, close to their family, I think that's a real bonus. Thank you.
Thank you all for your responses.
Thank you. Do we have any questions online? No. Okay. Any more from the audience? Come on up.
Samantha Townsend, Ward 2. So I just have a question about when grants are proposed to the city council. So I know, I guess maybe it was the last meeting or the meeting before, the fire chief came and talked about how he wanted to get a grant for 4 more firefighters. And there was some good conversation about, oh, when this grant runs out in 3 years, maybe the budget can accept 2 more, maybe not the full 4. But then when it was brought to vote, the full 4 for the grant went through. And even the mayor made a comment, when we get the grant, we're not going to deny the grant, but then we're also not going to take 4 firefighters off. When the grant expires, we're not going to take 4 firefighters out of the fire station. So what would you do to predict those, to budget for that? Do you not get 2 firefighters the year before, or what are your guys' thoughts on when the grants run out? Where do we go from there?
Are you directing it to anyone in particular?
Just thoughts. I
Just
guess.
in general?
Yeah.
Okay, well, why don't we start with the incumbents?
Yeah, so I think the SAFER grant is pretty unique in that there are basically, in essence, permanent impacts of taking the grant. There's a lot of grants that the city gets that they're one-off, and really they help either facilitate projects we want to do, such as the West Lebanon downtown streetscaping grant. Some of the other grants we've gotten where it just helps us, advance what we're trying to do. But yeah, the SAFER grant is one where, really that it exists to help provide, in essence, bridge funding to allow cities, towns, et cetera, in New Hampshire to add firefighters. And then realistically, there's a choice at the end of that grant to keep those positions or not. I think that is, in the discussions that we had at City Council for that grant, that is why, where the mayor and I were coming down and saying, the reality is we probably wouldn't necessarily at that point lay people off. So is this something we can afford? And I think that's really just both in general and for where we are right now, the conversation we need to have. We applied for the SAFER grant last year. We did not get it. So I think at this point in time, we are in what I would say is a wait and see, but I anticipate having another discussion around whether or not we truly can afford to accept it. Because as I said in the meeting that night, I'm concerned by a $600,000 impact to that. You could layer that in through reserve funds and basically smoothing that impact out, or you could make cuts. And I think the reality is we would have to likely find ways to cut in other areas of the budget to accommodate that.
Thank you. That is a very good question. I will say I am one of the counselors who supported the application of the grant for 4 new firefighters. Part of the reason I did that is because this is an application we had submitted a year ago, had received it, had then subsequently been told there isn't enough funding to cover it. So this was already a discussion. The previous year, we had already heard the fire department was short at minimum 16 positions. We found our way to a quarter of the shortage. And it seemed incumbent on us to at least have that discussion. By not allowing the application to move forward, the council would have been effectively making the decision on behalf of the voters. After we heard in December how important our emergency services were, how concerned our residents were about any cuts or lack of sufficient support to our emergency services and our first responders, it didn't feel acceptable to me to make that decision that went contrary to what we had heard from so many residents. I do agree with Councillor Whittlesey. I actually had brought up the point specifically, the opinion of the mayor aside, that we do seriously need to discuss if we get the grant, whether we're going to accept it. I don't think it's a fait accompli. I don't think it's a guarantee that if we get it, we will accept it. And I think that's because we do need to have that conversation. We need to have that discussion with all the facts, all the information. We can't make that decision on behalf of other people. In terms of other grants, I believe we should follow the same process. We recently discussed the value of having a note tied to each decision that we're asked to make that tells us what the fiscal impact will be. We need to have that information. We need to evaluate both the short-term impact and the long-term impact. How definite is that impact? What is it going to be? Can we afford it? Can we afford not to do it? I think those are discussions we need to have. We certainly need to have this discussion about whether if we are awarded this grant, we can afford it. But we need to have all the information, and we can't make the decision not to move forward in contrast to what our residents have told us in one evening. Thank you.
Again, I've been in public safety for 40 years. We've had grant police officers in the cities that I've worked, grant police officers in towns that I've worked. And usually every time you apply for the grant, you're saying that you're going to keep those officers on after the grant expires. So you own it. You own the retirement that goes with them. You own everything. And again, I think I said this the other night in the council meeting, and I'm going to say it again. I think we're putting the cart before the horse. Why are we putting in an application if we don't know if we're going to accept it when it comes out or not? Haven't we got more important things to do than look at applying for grants that we're not sure if we're going to take it or not? Let's worry about the cost of what's going on now and deal with those things now instead of, well, you know what, we'll send the paperwork in. And if we get the money, then we'll think about what we're going to do with it. I just think that's poor planning, and it's the wrong avenue to go.
Thanks for the question. Not every grant is a gift. Grants come with substantial responsibilities and costs that far outlive the life of the grant, as all the people up here have said. I would not have supported that grant had I been on the council. I would have liked to have seen what we call a fiscal note in the legislature about the impact, the long-term impact on the city of accepting such a grant and accepting those positions, knowing that we would not be eliminating those positions when the grant expired. And I'm surprised that that kind of a fiscal note doesn't already exist before these decisions are made. I think that's what I heard, but I may have misheard, and I apologize if I did. So that's my take on that. And thanks again for the question.
I'd like to take us back to the budget workshop meeting where both the police department and the fire department made their presentation. I sat in the room. I have notes from the meeting. Both representatives from those two groups said, our staffing is better than any other municipality in the state of New Hampshire. We have open positions, but we are able to do our mission. Specifically, the fire person who was leading the discussion for the fire department said, we believe it's acceptable to add one new position a year. Fast forward to the final budget meeting that we had at Lebanon High School. And I don't know if anybody in the audience attended that meeting, but there was quite a show put on by the police and fire that night. There was a whole section of police officers on the bleachers. There was a sort of some rowdy, we are a fellowship and all of this stuff, and your house might burn down and there wouldn't be anybody to save you. And what if you have a heart attack? We wouldn't be able to get there on time. It was a show of fright to the people that were in that audience. They were scared, and I believe that was the intention, to scare the people. So I have a different recollection of the meeting and a different impression of the message that was being sent that night.
Yeah, again, thank you for the question. From my perspective, thinking back, I have sat through a few fire presentations and seen the data and the study going back to, I forget if it was 2004, 2008, and what our staffing needs were and how that has effectively been frozen since then. It's hard for me to believe, but 2004 is 21 years ago. So that's a long time to not be tracking with the city's growth. So I think it's clear from the data that the need is there. I think it's reasonable to expect that over the next 4 years, we may have to add 1, 2, 3 firefighters. So by 2029, when this grant would run out, I look at that and say we may have 3 or 4 new firefighters on our books anyway. In the meantime, we can get this grant and have those staff for free until that time. And I'm a big planner, so knowing that in 2029 we're going to need an extra $600,000, I much prefer that than to try and grapple with unexpected budget increases and budget needs this year. I think that planning gives us a lot of opportunity for more grants. And one last note on grants, and this is, I'm putting on my research administrator hat. You very rarely get everything you ask for when you apply for a grant. We asked for 4. We may well receive 2. So I'm with, I think it was Councilor Wilkie who said that we need to wait until we have the entire picture and know exactly what we're dealing with, and then make the responsible decision at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we do have, well, we're actually over time, but we do have a question from online, and so I'd like to allow that, and that will be our final question. Max?
Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Max.
Sure. All right, give me 1 moment.
Yes,
so,
go ahead and state the question.
There's been a lot of discussion about coming through the budget for changes and other procedures to find waste, which is great, but ultimately what you define as waste might differ from candidate to candidate. So I'd love to hear from each candidate specifically what kinds of things they personally prioritize to fund and personally deprioritize to fund. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, Max, could you repeat that? What specifically are you asking the candidates?
I'm specifically asking them to name one thing they prioritize in funding, one thing they don't prioritize in funding. So something that might be first on the chopping block if they needed to make cuts, and something that would never be on the chopping block if they needed to make cuts.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Candidate Burley, why don't you take that?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So one area I identified as an area where we could potentially make some cuts is looking at overtime. When you looked at the 2025 budget across the board, across all departments, including salaries and all the benefits that go along with it, it totaled about $2 million. So that seems like an area where we can dig into and hopefully get those numbers down. A lot of departments probably don't need overtime. That may be an area where that's a want, not a need. So I would focus on that as just sort of my first approach. I'm very much not in favor of cutting services. I think advanced transit is really wonderful. I'm really glad that our community has it. I think it's very important to a lot of people. So I'm not interested in cutting services that those of us who are least privileged require and rely upon the most. Thank you.
I would like to say that we need to make sure that we have a safe community So I would think of public safety so that our roads are in decent condition, sidewalks are in decent condition. Those kinds of things I think should be prioritized. Obviously, we're not the school board. I would say education should be the first thing where our tax dollars should go, quite frankly. I do think, along with the idea that there is a lot of overtime built into the budget, and I agree with Nicole that that would be a place where we would need to start looking. I would like to understand what our legal fees are and what they are going for. That was a kind of a surprising budget item. I would really want to understand, and I think, Paul, you might have brought this up in a way. I'm not sure that it's in our best interest to run a full service ambulance service. I do think we need a very robust 911 response service, but I do think that I saw a lot of red ink in the general fund around the EMS program. So I think there's some opportunities not to make our EMS service less safe and available to us, but it could be some money that we should not leave on the table and we should take a look at.
Well, I'm going to agree with others that public safety and infrastructure are non-negotiable for me. We simply can't let our pipes burst. We can't neglect people who need help. We have to fund those functions. I would take a close look at our TIF districts. Those are costly and they divert funds from one place to another place. And as one counselor, I think, said earlier, that there are not a lot of projects happening in the downtown TIF district. And that seems to me to be a waste of effort and time. And I would want to take a really hard look at that. Why aren't there projects? And if there aren't any projects, should there even be a TIF district there?
I think that's a great question that was posed. I think first of all, I'd look at would be the staffing issues. If we have staffing shortages, that we've had these positions open for 2 or 3 years, do we really need them if we've been functioning without those 3 people or 2 people? We've shown and we've told us that they can work without those people. I think we really do need to look at some of the services that we provide and see if there's other funding opportunities available for the ambulance service and the EMS service. Do we want to be in that business? Would be one of the questions. I think we also need to have a strong support for safety in the infrastructure that we have, because that's what we own. So I would not look at those areas to be cut back. I think the safety issue of sidewalks is huge, and I don't think we have enough sidewalks in the town to begin with. I think the biggest thing I would look at, one, is the staffing to start with. And then the second thing would be overtime. Can we utilize our salary officers more and do other shift coverage when somebody's out sick versus having it go out to overtime? We seem to be pretty tight in the city departments of having a supervisor. So why not utilize those supervisors to cover the cost and cut some of the cost? Thank you.
Well, at some point, this is going to sound a little bit repetitive. I do think that infrastructure is one of those things that we need to maintain. It needs to be available. As my neighbor here says, we need to be concerned with things like our sidewalks and our roadways, especially since, as candidate Ford Burley also mentioned, it's important that we care for the most vulnerable in our society, that we have allowances for them. And sidewalks are one of those things that, regardless of whether you have a car, regardless of what your means are for getting around, you still need to be able to access where you're going. Some of the things to cut, I think they've already been discussed. We do need to take a look at vacant positions, at overtime, at in general our structure and how our employees may be utilized effectively. Also, I do agree. I was one who brought up the concern with the TIF district last year. And I do think that we need to reevaluate whether it is still serving us or whether that money can be returned to the general fund and can ease the burden on the rest of our taxpayers.
So I think my perspective is, yeah, we need to maintain essential services, but I also think we don't want to lose areas like the rec arts and park department and what they do, and the library and what they do, and the vital role they serve our community, as well as, like, and I'll include DPW in that. And we've all seen, the snow and like that we've gotten the past few weeks. And as I was out shoveling, the times I would see that DPW plow truck coming by didn't, they kept our roads clear. So I think we need to really be careful about, where we're spending the money. And I think it's, where I don't want to cut is something that will have a huge disproportionate negative side effect of that cut. And I think that's where you have to be really careful. I actually wouldn't look at EMS to cut, because they're like 60 to 70% of our fire calls, by the numbers. I would, we want to look at how we can, approach those and how we can find efficiency. But I mean, truly, and we bill for those, the ambulance calls, to the extent that everything can be billed, we try. We have pilot agreement in place with APD for some of the calls related to them. I think what we need to do is look at how we could expand things like that more for areas that may have disproportionate utilization. Things that I would cut, yeah, I mean, we've all kind of looked at the TIF district. It isn't the hugest pot of money, but it is important. And I think I would look to kind of, at this point, non-critical, capital expenditures that don't otherwise have, some kind of grant funding. I wouldn't want to cut them completely, because if there's a grant that's going to pay for like 80-90+% of it, I'd want to do that because it's a great use of money. But I also don't want to, be stuck with something where it's more like we pay 90 and a grant pays 10.
Okay, thank you. We are over time. We're about 15 minutes over time into the school department's section. So
Sorry, school board.
yeah. If our school department candidates are okay with going over a little bit longer, I would allow that. Show of hands, yes to extend. Show of hands not to extend. Okay, I think the noes have it at this point. So candidates, I had promised you a 1-minute wrap up. We'll stick to that, but if we could keep it very brief, please. Doug, go ahead.
Thank you all for the opportunity to serve. And I know it's going to be tough going forward, but, I'm here to see it through.
Thank you all for coming out, for listening to us. It's certainly going to be a difficult year, difficult few years. I really hope that we can work together to find solutions. I certainly offer that I'm always available. I imagine anybody on this table would agree. Please reach out to us, ask us your further questions. We need to fix this, and I do think we can do it. We can find solutions. There have been great ones offered, and I'm excited to see what we can do with them. So thank you.
I think, first of all, thank you for coming and thank you for asking the questions. I think if you continue down the path of the choices that we've made, you're going to stay the same route. They've had 4 years to fix this and they haven't done it yet. So that's why I think we need some new blood on this board to move forward, to come through with some new ideas and new approaches instead of the same old, same old. Thank you.
That's a tough act to follow. I just think we need to get very creative about finding revenue where we're not currently finding revenue. And I know I have some idea as to how to do that. We also have to get very creative about housing. We have not been creative about housing, and that's a critical need that we share with all towns and cities in New Hampshire. We're not in this alone. Lebanon is not in this alone, and we need to reach out to our neighbors for help, and we need to be a leader at the same time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I would just close with, we need as our guiding principles that our city government is supposed to be upholding. We need to take care of the needs of the people that are living in the city today. I think there's been a hyper focus on helping for 20 years down the road for things to be better. A lot of the ways that we can't collect some taxes on some of the development for years in the future. I think we have to really focus and follow that guiding principle that we are going to make sure the people today that are living in Lebanon are taken care of.
Thank you all. I'll just say, I think at least several of us at this table have information about our platforms and other ideas online. So I encourage you to continue to seek out information about us. And I thank you all for coming out. Thank you for your questions. I look forward to working with you in the future, hopefully, and with all of Lebanon's residents. Thank you.
Okay. Candidates, thank you and good luck. We'll begin now with the candidates for school board. We'll take just a couple of minutes to allow for the changeover. School board candidates, if you would like to come up and take a seat, please. Go ahead and sit down. Thank you. No specific order. Nice to meet you, Leila.
Nice to meet you.
Is
it just the three of us? I'm Layla.
I'm Joe.
I'm Carrie. Nice to
Hi,
meet you.
nice to meet you.
I'm normally a hugger, but that's a bit
Yeah, I think there's 5 people. So I'm surprised it's just the 3 of us.
There's spots.
Yeah. Just thought about that.
I did like that. Let's see. What's our height? We'll get started. It's better for our height. Okay. More like us.
Okay, everyone, I think we're going to jump right in since we're already a little over time. We are going to begin now our round for the candidates running for school board. We have 4 candidates running for a 3-year term and 3 seats on the school board. They are Joseph Castelot, Carrie O'Hara, Travis Talbert, and Layla Bull. I do not believe Travis Talbert is with us tonight. Okay. I'm going, as we did with the city councilor candidates, I'm going to have each candidate give a 4-minute introduction, and then we will jump right into questions. So, candidate Bull, why don't you start? Oh, you can speak right there.
Hi, I'm Layla Voley, a mother of 3 beautiful girls, Amira, Amal, and Aziza. My daughter Amira is a kindergartner here at Hanover Street School. And when my wild 3-year-old twins, Amal and Aziza, are ready for school, they will be joining her at Hanover Street School. I am a freelance screenwriter and voice actor. My husband is a geriatric psychiatrist at Dartmouth Hitchcock. We have been here nearly 4 years and hope to be here for 40 more. I grew up in the public school system, and it would be a great honor to serve the brilliant, bright students of Lebanon, their families, the extraordinary teachers and staff, and this community by becoming a member of Lebanon School Board. I love public school. I believe in public school. I believe that all students in our public schools deserve the best quality education that we can provide for them. I've been so impressed by the care and passion and attentiveness this community pours into this school system. Prioritizing academics with quality teaching, we have wonderful teachers and excellent student-teacher ratios. By going into classrooms as a 4WIN science volunteer and serving as a committee head on the PTO, I've seen firsthand how much parental and community support comes together to give our students extraordinary opportunities, from the exhilarating plane building project for our high schoolers to special events lovingly crafted by our music, art, gym, guidance, and library teachers. I attended one of Superintendent Amy Allen's strategic plan discovery meetings, carrying community members and parents discussing what should be our priorities as a school district. Let's see. And the overwhelming feeling of the room is, how are we raising and teaching the students of Lebanon to be equipped to be out in the world? We have this confidence in excellent academics that we need to continue to support. We also need to wholeheartedly support those special opportunities available through activities, as well as the soft skills that make a difference in hiring, no matter what stage our students enter the workforce. On the school board, I would ensure we continue to provide the edge that keeps every door possible open for our students, with a wide array of artistic, athletic, and academic activities that not only enrich the student experience, but also provide stable ground for students to hone skills that remain with them throughout their lives. I would support our teachers being able to teach our students with the expertise and experience they have. I'm a mom in this district with a philosophy grounded in lifelong learning. The goal of education is to give these brilliant young minds with boundless potential every opportunity possible. The opportunity to learn is imperative, not only to have people that will be in every job sector, electricians, doctors, teachers, writers, business, tech, retail, and government workers, but also to keep this community a place filled with good people. Thank you, and I hope you will vote for me for the school board.
Thank you. Candidate O'Hara.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carrie O'Hara. I am a mom of 4. I have a 12-year-old son who's at the middle school, Jameson. I have Molly, who's 5. She's also at Hanover Street. And then I have a 4-year-old Jack, who is at the Montessori Discovery School. And then I have a 10-month-old baby who is gratefully watched by somebody who I could never live without. I grew up in Lebanon. So I moved here from New York when I was 4 years old. I went to Lebanon schools. I really I throve. I really, really did. I went back to school. I currently am a mental health nurse practitioner. I have a PhD. I could not have done any of that without the Lebanon School District. I see many of you out there who actually taught me when I was in school, and that's really quite humbling for me. So what's important to me, I have a personal interest in Lebanon in a variety of ways. I feel that it's very important to give back. And as almost a lifelong member of the community, this is one way that I feel I could give back at this point. I believe in quality education, and public schools in my mind is the way to go. There's a lot of diversity. There's a lot of learning that happens that's not just part of the curriculum. That my kids have been shaped into the humans that they are right now because I drop them off at school and I pick them up at the end of the day. But what that happens in between is they're learning from their peers. They're learning from the librarian, from the janitor, from the cafeteria workers, from the administrative office. And it's teaching them to be really great people. I'm an effective communicator. I'm a good listener. I currently work in Vermont and communicate largely with the state on a regular basis. And that's really important to me, to be able to have communication and to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. Some people call me an over communicator, which if I am elected, I apologize if that is part of it. My husband would certainly say I communicate too much. Teamwork. Teamwork is extremely important to me. I see myself collaborating with all of you, with everybody online, with the entire city, with my fellow board members, with the city, whoever else we need to have conversation with. Many of the decisions that come to the school board are from the state. I definitely see myself in that platform as well. I'm fiscally responsible. I run a very tight ship at home. We run a very strict budget, and it's very important to me to make sure that we are fiscally responsible throughout our city as well as our schools. I have a focus on what's best for our students in many ways. As Layla said, you know, it's not just the academics, it's sports, it's drama, it's music, it's all of the other pieces that really cultivate these students. And most importantly, I'm an advocate. I truly, truly believe that we are the voice of our kids, and I very much would like to be a part of that going forward. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Candidate Castelot.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Joe Castelot, and as these two also mentioned, I'm also a parent. I have two young sons, one of which is in the Lebanon School District at Mount Lebanon. And really the reason that I'm running is because I believe that we should all be of service to our community. And the area that I believe I can bring the most is in education. And so I have a doctorate in education, and I also work at Dartmouth College. I'm the director of the student center there. And so a lot of my work goes into trying to advocate for the college age students, make sure that we're helping provide a holistic education to our students, not just in the classroom, but the experiences of just their everyday life and how to be good citizens on campus. And that extends to my belief in public education. I believe that really what we're doing is trying to raise the people that'll be sitting in this room someday. We want to make sure that they're engaged with their community. And we want to make sure that when they are in these seats, that they are people that are well educated, that they are also people that want to give back to the community. And I really think that starts with having a really strong school board. What I believe in is that Lebanon is one of the, if not the best school district in the state. I'm amazed at all of the items that my son comes home with and educates us on and corrects us on. And I really believe that this, we're looking at the future of the school board, and that's what I'd like to be a part of.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone that has a question for our candidates? No, okay, well, fortunately I have one, so I will start us off. Okay, the question is, in August of 2024, a new law, RSA 32(5)B, went into effect that enables a municipality to enact a tax cap for both municipalities and school districts. The tax cap shall be either a fixed dollar amount, a fixed percentage, or a multiplication factor applied to the amount of local taxes raised by the town or district. Do you support enacting a tax cap for the city or school district? Candidate Vole, how about if you start?
That's a great question. I think this entire community is really feeling the tax burden and the tax uncertainty. And just as Carrie said, that we're all careful budgeters, that's part of being an adult. But making these decisions on behalf of our young people of what do we have available. So I think that a tax cap does make sense. As a member of the school board, I would work with the budget of what we have and to be smart about what we have and what's allotted there. And as a private citizen, and I have actually been doing this for the last few years, I'd be engaging a lot with our state government to be looking for true solutions, because what Lebanon is experiencing is a lot of different families in a lot of different places. We happen to be families with young children, and that gives us our eyes on the prize of what can we provide for them for the future and what can we do for that now. Lebanon is also comprised of a lot of people who have done their time in the workforce, who have done their time raising their children. And to be aware of that and to be cognizant of that, that means we have to be respectful of the budgets that they're working with. So as a citizen, I keep driving for what changes can the state be making to alleviate some of this burden that we've been having. And as a member of the school board, I would work with what we have.
Great answer. And great question. For one, so I'm going to tell you a little story. Here's my over communication factor. My son came to me today, my 4-year-old, and said, "You're going to the grocery store, so I think you could bring me back a toy." Well, that sounds like the most ridiculous answer to any question that any kid could ever ask, right? So I said to him, I said, I think we're going to start giving you an allotted amount of money per month that you can spend. And let's start with $5. And he thought this was like the greatest plan that ever happened, of course, because he's 4 and $5 was a lot of money. And he started immediately thinking of all of the different things that he could buy with $5. And I didn't bring him to the grocery store with me, but he will be going with his $5 at some point, I'm sure of it. So in short, I would definitely support a cap. We're very hard workers. Lebanon is built on a foundation of the working class. There are a few people who are extraordinarily fortunate and who have done very, very well, but the vast majority of people are really hardworking middle class citizens. And I was at many of the city council meetings when they were discussing the budget, and to hear how negatively impacted people were and needing to move or talking about selling their houses, and that made me very sad. And I would never want to contribute to that when we have the ability to utilize the resources that we have. Being in the mental health field and medicine, there's a lot of resources out there that are for free that we can really dig into. And I do this on a regular basis where I look through various websites. It takes time, of course, but these things are there. And I think that we could certainly, as a community, be looking at these things. If there's something that was truly needed that exceeded our budget, or I'll give you $5 and you can go to the store on Saturday instead of today.
I think really what hearing about a tax cap is something that I, on the surface level, would support. What I do question is, would we end up being painted into a corner where we weren't able to address changes at the state level? And that'd be one of my concerns. There's just a lot of snow. There's a lot of concerns that I would have about losing state funding and then us having to kind of work with what we have to work with, which I think is an important budgeting skill, but being in a place where we couldn't then try to make up for it with our own funding.
Thank you. Question? Can you state your ward and your name, please?
Yes, I'm Tia Winter, Ward 3. I'm also a school board member, so good luck and get used to seeing my face if you have a successful campaign. I've got 2 questions. The first one is, what is your opinion of New Hampshire cutting special education funding? The second one, do you want to answer that and then I'll ask a second?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead. You need me to repeat the question since
No.
Okay.
Do you have any context for them in that?
Yeah, so the Frank Edelblut had sent out an email stating to be prepared for cuts to special education funding. And so one of the factors that you may be presented with as a board member is how to continue to meet special education needs. Lebanon School District is pretty good at going above and beyond. We fund that, our taxpayers fund that because we value that. We believe our taxpayers value that. If we continue to get decreased state aid, we then have to face that question of, do we cut those programs or do we raise taxes to fill that, or do we make cuts? So is that good?
Eh,
right, go ahead.
This was actually one of my questions, so some percentages for you so that you have a little more information. The state of New Hampshire is covering 67% of its share of special education aid, which is a reduction from 87% in 2024 and 98% in 2023. So the commissioner of the Department of Education stated the decrease is due to the increased numbers of students requiring special education services, and also that the state is now covering services for students up to age 22. So that would mean that with these cuts, the school districts would now have to shoulder more of the cost of special education services. So now I'll let you answer. And Candidate Castelot, why don't you take it?
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to what I was saying about the tax cap. I think there are just going to be decisions that we have to make where we're looking at what are the values of our community and how does our support for education align with that. I heard, with the city council candidates that we're a community that wants to take care of its most vulnerable population. And we are a group of people that really focus on access to education and see that it's an important value. And so I would support finding the best ways to try to make sure that we are supporting special education needs. I think where I would start is what can we do with what we currently have, and then from there look at strategies to be able to make up the difference in what we're seeing from the tax cuts or the funding cuts from the state.
First, I'd like to say how sad. There's a population who has a need, and we see this across the board where that's the first place that money is pulled from. I certainly support what the city council is doing now, and that the school board is doing now, and they are looking to kind of meet that middle mark. I think we would have to look at the various programs, look at what is detailed, look at the numbers of people who are utilizing those services. Is there a way to combine some of it and do a little bit of magical scheduling that we could save some money in some places? But I don't think that compromising education for those who need it is the answer.
I think my fellow candidates had great responses. The point of public school is that every individual gets the opportunity to learn, and it doesn't matter where that position means that we need to meet them where they are. And I have just been so grateful that that spirit of public education is so upheld by this district. My daughter Amira, she did the pre-K with Miss Jan at Mount Leb last year, which she was pre-K 4. And there were several students that needed some extra education. And wow, the quality of our teachers. Once again, actually, Carrie and I both have daughters in the same class. And there's the same thing. There are these paras that are in there that are caring for each student, that are not keeping these students ostracized and separate, but teaching them that they are valued in this community and that they are valued no matter what. And this kind of is the society we want. This is what the society we want our young people to have, to think of that. I would have to be able to look at what are the specific creative ways that we could do that. But the point of public education is no student gets dismissed for things beyond their control.
Thank you.
Yes, it's an important question because special education needs are certainly not declining. So the second question is, what is your opinion on the elimination of the Department of Education?
Who wants to go first?
I can start. That's a loaded question. Again, how sad. I think I'm faced a little bit differently in my work Monday through Friday of the mental health system, and the talk of the CDC going away and all of that stuff. But I think I think the same principles apply in that these are very important pieces of people's lives. And if I was able to work and homeschool my children, maybe I would. I think that they would lack a significant social aspect that they greatly need. And I think that if we continue to pinch in whatever way the future's going, I think that you're going to see a bad place.
I know it's kind of a little bit of a buzzword in my opening remarks about lifelong learning, but as an actor, there's this expectation for professional actors most people might not know, and it's that Patti LuPone still goes to dance class 4 times a week, and she's in her 70s. Awesome. But it is a kind of focus on lifelong learning. My husband works at Dartmouth Hitchcock, and I'd say within our medical system, we can see that the doctor that you want to be serving you is someone who has this presence of mind on lifelong learning. And this passion and the way that we're sharing this lifelong learning and putting this emphasis on it will affect this entire community. Can we always learn? Can we not know the answer and know how to find the answer? Can we impart these skills of critical thinking and analysis that will only serve to find more and more solutions? Because let's face it, as difficult as it is for our town right now, it's incredibly difficult, the world that we are giving our children right now. And they need these kind of critical thinking and the care that our teachers are able to provide, and the wisdom and expertise and the discourse and the dialogue of those social dynamics of how can we work together? How can we find solutions? And that starts in school.
That's a really tricky question to answer. I mean, my own thoughts are, it seems like a ridiculous thing. But I also think that the community that we live within, I think we would here hopefully hold ourselves to a higher standard than just meeting the minimum requirements that are set out by, or no requirements set out by a federal government. I think also we're seeing kind of not in the same effort, but we're seeing a different type of effort to lower standards from the state. And I think really what I've heard, and I'm not sure if I remember who had said it, but we're not a community that's just going to meet the minimum and be happy with that. We want to make sure that we're going above and beyond that. And so I think really what I would try to do in this role is make sure that our students don't see a difference, that our community doesn't see a difference, that no matter what the standards are at the federal level, and that if they were to completely gut it and go away, that our students would still see the same education that they're receiving, which would be top tier education.
Thank you. We have a question from online. Okay, WH, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. My name is Wendy Hall. I'm in Ward 3, and I am one of the outgoing school board members. I've spent the last 9 years on the school board and spent numerous hours looking through and understanding the budget. My question is, I find the comments about the tax cap and supporting one very concerning. So what I would like to ask is, if a tax cap was implemented, it would almost certainly mean that we would be cutting something. So I would like to understand what you would cut first. Would you support things like larger class sizes? Would you support cutting teachers? So just looking for some expanded thought around that. Thank you.
Okay, Candidate Castelot, would you like to take that?
Sure. To be clear, I don't support the tax cap. I think on the surface level, it sounds like a great idea, but I do have concerns of, as I mentioned earlier, painting ourselves into a corner. For this exact reason, there are things that we've really described as non-negotiables, and we've already had the example of special education losing funding from the state. And I think those are the decisions we would have to make. And I do think that if we were to institute a tax cap, we would have to say, okay, we're going to support special education. What is the item that's going to be on the chopping block? There's nothing that I see in my child's education in Lebanon's vision of a graduate that I don't think is important. I do think realistically, if we want to continue to have the great education that our students are receiving right now, there isn't really anything that I would say we can afford to cut. I think we'd have to look at class sizes. But that, again, that's not something that I want to have to do. I think what we often talk about, and it was mentioned here, is the great teacher-student ratio, the paraprofessionals that are in our classrooms, and that attention that our students get. And so I don't have any priorities of things that I would cut. I'd try to find ways that we could make it work with what we have.
Thank you, candidate O'Hara.
I agree. I think whenever you look at a budget, you look at every ounce of it. And then you look at what was utilized in the last fiscal year, what is projected as far as how many students are coming in, what's projected the utilization for this coming year. And, maybe it's as easy as, we could cut from buying 20 boxes of pens to we could cut to buying 15. This is obviously wishful thinking, but I think that for me, it's always looking at all of the data and looking at what's in front of me versus where we're going and see where we can match up. I agree that there might be a time where we would have to make the hard decision and say, we have to combine some classes or make larger class sizes or something of that nature. I think what we're seeing right now is wonderful. And this to me is almost gold standard. We, as Layla mentioned, our daughters are in the same class. There's 5 paraprofessionals. I'm not saying that there isn't a role for every single one of them, but maybe that's something that we look at, and we look at how we can kind of, blend a little bit of that to be more fiscally responsible. I don't want my grandmother to move out of the city because I want my daughter to have one-on-one attention in the classroom.
Thank you. I'd say my top priority would be to not cut staff. We're all aware of the economics facing everyone, but to truly imagine going out into the workforce right now without what has brought someone to this community, there is not all these opportunities. We have this obligation to the people who serve our children, who serve our students, to protect them, to take care of what they do. I would hope it could be more of a kind of creative, maybe we can place people smartly, but I would say my number one priority would not be to eliminate positions where we can help it. If it means a hiring freeze, it's a little different than someone who's already committed to being here and who is already serving our community. And that also goes hand in hand with the priority of school is academics, and that is coming from this quality teaching. So to give that security and confidence in our teachers, I think makes a big difference. I believe in a lot of the creative solutions we've even talked about is that it is a fine-tooth comb what if situation. It's going line by line and hoping for what details we can find to make something smarter. The class size suggestion makes a lot of sense, even though it's not one that we would prefer, but that's 100% the first place that makes a lot of sense, even if it's against preference. As I said, I went to public school and my class sizes were about 28 to 32. throughout K through 12. And I think that might be extreme, but right now, what our kids, it's 15, 16 for 14 for elementary school, which is awesome. What a gift. What a gift we are giving our kids. And I think that creative solutions does also include not to eliminate programs, but to look through those programs in detail. So not to feel like anybody is on a block right away, but that nobody likes to make cuts, but where can we tighten up so that everyone still has all of these opportunities available to our young people?
Thank you. Do we have questions from the audience? Yep, come on down.
Joan Townsend, Ward 2. So to give you a little history on me, I've served on the school board. I've driven a bus with 42 children on it, special needs and all children, one per driver, 42 children. I have worked in the school systems. I've been a para. I've been a parent helper in a classroom. And I know, like the school board, just like the city councilors are facing huge cuts, governmental cuts. So instead of saying we're going to tax the taxpayer, I'd like to ask each one of you, what have you thought about to maybe increase some revenue? I have ideas that would help increase revenue for the school district, but I'd like to know if you have any ideas instead of looking at your budget, making adjustments, to not have the burden come back on a taxpayer. What would you recommend to help generate income or to solve the cuts that you're going to be looking at coming up in the future?
Candidate O'Hara, do you want to take that?
Sure. I think one way that we can do this is by increasing the volunteer level of parents in schools. When I was growing up in Lebanon, I remember specifically there was a Friday program that my mom was very heavily involved with. And it was very similar to a study hall. When we had my older son start school at Hanover Street, I asked how could I get involved? What can I do? And the one thing that I was told was the PTO. That's wonderful. I did the 4 Wins, which is the science program. That's also wonderful. I still have more time to give. I still want to be there, and I'm not alone. I actually was approached by the nurse at Hanover Street the beginning of the year asking if I wanted to pick up some part-time or some a day here or there. And I said, well, I'd be happy to donate a day. You know, I work Monday through Thursday. I'd be happy to give you some time. And we don't currently have that ability. So I think that would afford some revenue in some places because it might allow some people who are ready to retire, might allow some people to take some vacations who haven't been able to take vacations. That would be right off the top of my head, that would be the number one thing that I would look into.
I think that's a great answer. First of all, also, thanks, Joanna, for all you've done for the school system. There are certain kind of fundraising and donations. I love your suggestion of donation of time because I do feel like as we've served on the Hanover Street PTO together, we're just surrounded by these amazing, awesome parents who have so much to bring and so much care and generosity. And the first question is, what can we do to get in there? What's the support we can offer? So that presence and that heart, it's here. It's how do we utilize that more? When it comes to fundraising and donations, the PTO does a kind of basic just call if you'll send in some funds. And what those funds have been used for so far is telling teachers, do you have a dream project that's not in the budget that we can help allot some of this funding for? I think that we have the knowledge and the experience and many, many technical parents in the PTO, and that could take that a level further. What is something like, hey, can we help with the burden of this is going to be on the block if we can't add to that? A really good example of things like this is whenever I was in school, the band boosters or organizations that might be dedicated to certain programs, this athletics funding having specific programs, but how to kind of coordinate and collaborate so that programs don't get left behind. It's just that parents know how to jump in and be part of the team.
Thank you for your service. I think really it worries me whenever we talk about generating revenue from an educational area. What I would want to look at, I think these are great suggestions, but what would worry me is that's not a sustainable model that we could rely on every single time. I think really what I'd want to look at is where are areas that we could utilize maybe the facilities within the school system on times that doesn't take away from the educational mission of the schools. And so I think really off the top of my head, I can only come up with a couple of ideas, but I could imagine that, if these buildings are empty over the weekend, that there's opportunities there. But I would hesitate to look at items that we would want to generate revenue that would come at a cost to our students.
Real quick. So the things that I was thinking of is school dances. Kids love to dance. You go to the pool party in Lebanon when they have it, and it's fabulous. I know back with Sue DeRocha, she's retired, I believe. They put on a mystery night. I'm just thinking fun things that kids love to see teachers do. That could be a fun thing, it could help support a program, but anyway, but thank you.
Could I follow up with you for a moment, Joanna? I love that idea. I think that kind of events focus is a great idea. I would want to make it more of a suggested donation place so it doesn't make students not feel like they can't be part of it, because I think a lot of people would take the suggested donation and maybe even go further. That's the kind of thing where I know on the PTO there are so many things. Oh gosh, Katie's just so good at getting donations of who can we ask to donate to make this even bigger? Who can do that? So I think that that's a great angle to go with the event.
People would show up.
Absolutely. I very much agree.
Okay, thank you. We had another question.
Mary Eads, Ward 3, currently a board member and leaving after 9 years. And I taught in Lebanon for 34 years. So my question is, it's kind of political, but looking at the Commissioner of Education in New Hampshire and the 306s, how do you think that you could figure out how to stay abreast of what's going on in Concord? And how can this district and other districts, I guess we should just say this district, keep itself aware and keep active so that things aren't happening that we don't want to happen for our kids' education?
Okay, Kennedy Castellat, why don't you take that?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple ways to do that. Of course, in keeping aware of what's going on, just making sure that we communicate with, I think you started to say it, but I think our partners in other school districts, I think maybe some that are a little closer to the Capitol and seeing what they're hearing. I also think the school board doesn't just work in isolation. And so relying on partners within the city of Lebanon and making sure that we're keeping up to date. I think what is really a difficult piece of this is knowing what's real and what's not sometimes. And I think making sure that we're keeping our ear to the ground, but going to reliable sources for that information, because it feels like we're having a lot thrown at us right now. And knowing what is actionable, what's not, or, what are things that may be coming down the turnpike, but aren't there yet that we can kind of prepare for. But I would be interested in looking at partnerships with other school districts that are also interested in have the same values as us.
I think that's a great question. I do this a lot now. So the state of Vermont, of course, is ever moving in their Department of Mental Health. And just like everything else. And what I do is I have formulated partnerships at the state level that we have weekly conferences. And even if it's just I have an hour commute. So I talk a lot on the phone during that. And I usually schedule a meeting during that component of time. And I'd be willing to do the same sort of thing with the state of New Hampshire and really developing that partnership amongst the community. You know, the Upper Valley is comprised of multiple school districts. And I think that the school board, you know, working together would be very helpful. And maybe there's a cohort of people who are interested in the political landscape of the state that could kind of formulate a small subcommittee that, you know, maybe they meet quarterly, maybe they meet once a month or something of that nature, and give everybody a quick down and dirty cheat sheet of what's happening. I think there's a lot of ways that this could be done. And I think that the number one factor for me is partnership.
I think that partnership also extends to how we're working as a school board together. In political bodies, sometimes it appears that there are these divisions that should not be divisions. And as a school board, I would hope that we could have this kind of team aspect. That subcommittee suggestion's a great idea of who can have their eye on the prize of what's going on to be a communicator, because when it comes to local journalism, we really live in a uniquely qualified place that actually reports on local politics and state politics with depth. But that won't be enough. It does have to be getting ahead of the curve, and it has to be that communication of what can we do to be a unit that is unified in protecting this district, and reaching out to other partners, and understanding that that would be something throughout the term. That's not a passing situation. It's a driving force for why I am running for school board, is that it takes a high level of activism and a very, very trained eye on what people might be doing while you're distracted. And that would not be the goal of this school board. I think the goal of this school board is to understand if there is an agenda that would make it harder for us to give the education and the quality of education Lebanon is doing, then we need to vocally be a leader for all the other schools in New Hampshire, and to vocally be a leader that it would be unacceptable, and to make it clear what legislation is not fair to helping students, but is an opportunistic in nature.
Okay, do we have other questions from the audience? Sure, come on down, please.
Hi, MJ DiDomenico, Ward 1, outgoing school board member. Kind of gonna take you down a completely left-hand turn to a policy question. So a lot of school districts throughout the nation, and even in New England, in Maine and Vermont, some New Hampshire school districts are starting to address policies that have an outright ban on the usage of cell phones K through 12 within the school, because there's been increasing research on the effects of social emotional learning, mental health rates, anxiety, depression among students, and just a lot of the problems it can cause with distractions in the classroom for teachers. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on introducing a policy like that within the city of Lebanon.
Would you like to take that, Layla?
Sure. I think that's something that is an aspect of being on the school board, is kind of leading our young people with care. I recently read the very popular novel, I guess it was nonfiction, The Anxiety Generation, where they're outlining exactly the level of damage that is happening to the brain with these this exposure to electronics, and this exposure to electronics like it's the Wild West. I guess actually it's likened to being in Mars. And so and what I make as a decision for my personal household, what I make as a decision for my children, might be different than what other households make sense. So while I personally am of the mind that my child will not have her cell phone till she was 16 and can drive because that was the rule in my house. Different families have a different reality. So I think coming up with a smart plan with some kind of administrative input of how to keep cell phones out of the classroom, how to kind of limit the true damage to neurological connections that it's doing is something that we can do our best with, but some of it is a household decision and kind of finding that balance.
Thank you for the question. I think that's a really, really hot topic right now. So my older son is at the age of middle school where cell phones are kind of becoming a thing. And we've gone round and round and round personally about how do we handle this? Do we allow for cell phones? And what we've opted to do is no cell phone. They make a watch through Verizon called a Gizmo that we can put it in school mode and that sort of stuff. So we've opted to do that. I do very much agree with Layla. This is a personal family decision on some levels. I think that we could brainstorm various ways to keep the phones out of the classroom while recognizing this is not going to be a perfect model. Even if we ban phones, kids are going to find ways to do things. I think that I would like to hear more from the public about what they feel regarding a policy like this, because this would definitely touch some nerves for some people. So I guess in short, I'm a little on the fence about it. I would need a little more information about what's happening right now in the schools to prevent any of this. And also my medical background says absolutely you shouldn't have a phone. There's so much bad about that and social media and all of that. I could go on for hours. But I think in short, I'm a little on the fence and I would want a little more information and a little more input before I would say yay or nay.
I think I've kind of two different answers. One would be my own personal opinion on it, and then also how I would approach this from the school board stance. I really think my stance on it is that my son, even though he has asked and he's in first grade and he wants a cell phone, is absolutely not. I think just having access to the internet and complete universe in all that at all times of the day, regardless of if it's at school, is not a good thing. What I agree with is I do think this is a situation that I'd love to hear more from the community on, because we also know that students aren't just finding these cell phones, their parents are buying them for them. And they're buying the ones that do connect to the internet. And so I do believe that when I do end up getting a cell phone for my child, or he buys one for himself, that I would make sure that it's one that makes phone calls, and that's pretty much it. Because I understand that the reason that my first cell phone that I got it was because I needed to call my parents to pick me up from work when I was too young to be able to drive myself. So there are realistic needs that students may need a cell phone. I think the questions that we would need to ask is, why do parents feel the need that their kids need cell phones? What are ways that we can make sure that we are seeing those needs through? And so is that, a complete ban on cell phones? Is that we have ways to mitigate that during the school day? And is it something that we can start to have discussions around with parents about how do we do both? How do we make sure that we're giving the community what it's asking for and needs, but also making sure that we're minimizing the distraction to our students and making sure that there's no point of them being at school if they're not going to be engaged. And if they have this distraction, then we're missing the mark.
May I piggyback off that?
Sure. Go ahead.
I love that kind of, what if we opened it up to the parents as well as discussions? This is something that maybe could be a school board idea that maybe could filter to different volunteer groups of having a kind of health with smart devices, and maybe even helping guide parents through when might make sense for their family. Because what we've decided for our families isn't something that we should just necessarily impose. However, I think that kind of wheedling that a child can do Mom, can I have a cell phone? Mom, can I have a cell phone? Mom, can I have a cell phone? You know, maybe that's the reason when someone thinks it's more normalized than what it is, versus having a bit more of a community care response of make the decision that makes the most sense for your family, but having a way to give all the tools to people who might not always have the time or the ability to take to see some of the repercussions that carry in the mental health field. Joe, when it comes to being in the Department of Education, I imagine it's quite an experience to see all the Dartmouth students dealing with this in college. It's not something that just disappears, but maybe something with more of a community health feel to how we can be a support to parents for that might be appropriate for the school board.
Okay. How about one last question? Is there anyone from the audience that has one? Okay, well, seeing none, then, oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Ward 1. My kids went to Lebanon schools. They went to school here. Had a wonderful time. I remember when it was a young mother with the anxiety and the joy of having kids in this wonderful district. This school to me, has wonderful memories, and it's a wonderful asset, and it's totally underused. And it is a school district property that probably costs a lot of money to maintain. So I'm wondering if you have any ideas on how to better utilize the school, and perhaps as a way that might also raise some revenue.
Okay. Candidate Castelot, why don't you take it?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think this kind of goes back to an answer that I had said previously in terms of revenue. Is we do have this building that largely is underutilized and has open space available. And so I would be interested to see if that was a direction that we wanted to go in. I think really what I would need to know more about is just, are there any limited uses of the space? What are the kind of laws around the space? And I deal with facilities in my job, and I know that there are just really specific things, that codes that you need to meet, that if you're behind by a year. And so I would want to look more into that, but I do think there are a lot of opportunities here to utilize the space. But I need to know more about its current use and what we're able to actually do with it. But I do think there are needs that parents have, that community members have, that again, I think it would be interesting to hear from the community as to what are things that they're looking for in this great area that they're not getting elsewhere, and are there opportunities to open it up to the general public for use?
I think that's a really great question. I too went to school here and have a lot of fond memories. I think that there's a lot of opportunity. I agree with your response, Joe, that there would need to be an in-depth evaluation of legally what can we do with this space. But, some of the potential options that come to mind, we have a gymnasium that could be utilized. We really are in need of basketball courts and that sort of stuff this time of year. That could be utilized in a different way. Obviously, this auditorium could be utilized. Maybe there's an office space that could be utilized as on an as needed basis, or could be turned into a community office space that people would rent either monthly or by the day, or whatever needs to happen. But I think that there's definitely some red tape that would need to be evaluated before we could make that decision. But this would be a building for sure that we could look at.
I think it's a great idea to utilize the space that we have. My first time coming to this building was to watch the drama club's Lion King, which was excellent. And some of that does come down to scheduling. So some of that also would be something I would need to learn of who is responsible for scheduling spaces, or is that an administrative position that goes into somebody else's current hours of what they can slate by building that out. And then what would be the cost to janitorial services? It's often one of the costs associated with renting a space. But as a creative person, any place you have a stage is wonderful. I know that, perhaps even things like if the students want to do a battle of the bands, or having, talent shows or fundraisers of a cabaret style, and having a whole stage built out where you have the luxury to just come and let people sit. But I know sometimes things have to do with disability compliant and all those other details that my fellow candidates have mentioned. But what a fun idea to be able to use what we have.
Hey, thank you. It's time for us to wrap it up now. So candidates, I'm going to let you do one last word. Keep it to about a minute or so. And candidate Volée, why don't you start?
Thank you. When I moved to Lebanon, it has been intended to be a lifelong move, and I'm so grateful to have lived here. It feels like the more time passes, the more that this is home, and this community is so important to me. And not only getting to see my daughters grow older, but getting to see my friends' kids grow older and watching them thrive and saying, wow, can you believe that they get the opportunity to do this or try that or fall on their face doing this? What a gift. I just want to thank this entire community for prioritizing and giving this care of our children that will stay with them through their whole lives, and this love of this community. I hope you will vote for me for school board, and thank you for your time. It would be an honor to serve.
I'd like to thank you all for coming, for listening to all of us. I'd like to thank my other candidates, to people online. This would be a true honor to be able to give back to a community that has offered me so much for so many years. Obviously, I would, be here for a long period of time if you were to vote me in. I've got a lot of kids who have a lot of years left in Lebanon School District. But I truly feel that I have something to offer and time to give, and I feel that this would be a constructive way to do that. And I truly hope that I get to see you again. Thank you all.
Thank you all for being here. You all are really the reason that I am running in the first place, because this is a community that cares about education. And it's a subject matter that I care deeply about. It's why I got my doctorate in education. I have family members who have worked in education, two that work one at the Board of Education for the state, and another one that is a teacher in Bow. My wife is involved in the PTO. I have an aunt and uncle who were both in the New Hampshire school systems for almost their entire careers. And so education is something that I care deeply about. Obviously, as a parent, I care deeply about the education that my children are receiving and will receive. But just as a community member, I'm, want to make sure that we're having the best school system in the state, that we're in top tier in the country. And it's something that I really just want to be of service to everyone. And I think back to about 10 years ago when my wife and I were looking to move into the area. And I asked someone at Dartmouth in the admission office to tell me a little bit about the school systems in the area. And he had told me that no doubt Lebanon is the place that you need to look. And I still believe that. I think Lebanon is the best place for me, for my family. And I'm already seeing the rewards of that investment years later. And so thank you all for being here. It's great to see a community that really cares about education.
Great, thank you. Okay, this concludes our program. I'd like to thank everyone for attending and also for logging in. I'd like to thank the school department for arranging for our sound and allowing us to use the building tonight, and also the City of Lebanon for managing the online portion, and Junction Arts and Media who recorded tonight, and we'll have that available as well for those who couldn't make it. Just a reminder, the city and school election day is Tuesday, March 11th. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Same day voter registration is available. And our polls are located Ward 1 right here at the SAU 88 building. Ward 2 is the United Methodist Church. And Ward 3 is City Hall in the City Council chambers. Thank you for coming. Don't forget to vote. Good night. Thank you.